Again, thank you all for attending today. There are about 100 folks who've signed up for today's webinar. Really appreciate the interest and your ability to spend a little bit of time with us. We do have a fairly full agenda, and so what I'd like to do is dive right in. There's a lot of stuff that I want to try to cover, and then as always, towards the end, leave some time for questions from those who might have them. So with that as sort of the overview, let me give you an idea of some of the things that I'd like to cover during our time together. I'm going to spend a few minutes, as we always do, talking about the economic overview, give you a little snapshot of what's happening with the Business Confidence Index and unemployment both at the state and the national level. As you all probably know, we just wrapped up an issue survey of our members. We ended up talking to over 500 members about what issues were important to them for the upcoming 2013-2014 legislative session. I'll go over those results and give you a little sense for what I think our work plan will be for 2013 and 14. Give you a brief update on Capitol Hill issues, and that's not going to be an exhaustive presentation. That would take the whole webinar. But I just want to mention a couple of things, then as I said at the end, leave some time for questions. So with that as the game plan, we talked briefly about the Business Confidence Index. As you can see, we continue the pattern of up and down behavior. The latest Business Confidence Index was slightly off in October. And while the overall index is still just barely positive, there are some interesting things to note in the sub-indices. And for those of you who've been part of this presentation before, you know this is where I like to look for more detailed information and analysis relative to what's happening with our members and how they feel about conditions, both for themselves and in mass and in the United States. It won't take you long to find the lowest number on this chart. It's the October 12 U.S. index, and clearly I think what this signals is a growing lack of confidence, at least during the survey period. This is obviously before the election was over, but a growing lack of confidence in what's happening nationally. There are all sorts of reasons for that. If you look at the bottom of the page, you see the quote from Fred Brinmeyer, who's with the FDIC, and I think, you know, clearly while Massachusetts companies remain very confident about their own ability to deal with economic circumstances and to continue to be successful and profitable, they're less certain about Massachusetts. You can see that the index just dipped into negative territory. The month prior it was at 50.1. In October it's 48.6. But it's that U.S. index that has fallen off precipitously, a 5.6 drop. If you look at it compared to a year ago in October of 2011, it's actually an improvement. In 11, the confidence in the U.S. economy was at 33. And again, anything above 50 is positive, anything below 50 is negative. So our members feel pretty negative about what's happening nationally in this. Unfortunately, lots of good reasons for that, not the least of which is the sort of bickering that goes on down there and takes the place of actual leadership. Anyway, I think this is, again, a report that we spent a lot of time looking at, and we appreciate the members who participate. We're going to a different format shortly, and we'll give a broader cross-section of the AIM membership an opportunity to respond on a monthly basis. So if you're an AIM member, keep your eyes peeled. You'll have the opportunity to participate in a different way in the Business Confidence Index going forward. And this is one of the probably most significant things that we do on a monthly basis in terms of economic analysis, and it's widely read and, at least by me, widely used for analysis for policy stuff. So we appreciate your being willing to do that. And as has been the case for the duration of this recessionary period, Massachusetts continues to do better than the country as a whole with respect to our unemployment rate. As you can see, since the early part of the summer, the May-June timeframe, our unemployment rate has crept upward. I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the fact that more people are now actually returning to the labor force in the hopes of finding employment. So I'm not trying to gild the lily here. I think obviously people returning to the labor force is a good thing, but the unemployment rate is creeping up, and it's something we'll have to keep our eyes on. And you can see that nationally, the rate has also crept up a little bit, just under 8%. And the good news, I guess, both nationally and here in Massachusetts is we're in far better shape this October than we were last October, and hopefully that trend continues. Although, as we'll see in a minute, there are some threats in terms of whether or not that will be the case. So with respect to the issues survey, again, if you're an AIM member and one of the 500 folks that we talked to, I think you'll find that this list is, first of all, no surprises, and secondly, contains a lot of the items that we have historically focused on. No surprise to me, healthcare cost control came out #1 again. Since we have done the survey, and this goes back, I think this is the 6th time that we've done it, and we do it every 2 years, so 12 years worth of survey data. Healthcare cost concerns have topped the list in each of the prior surveys, and they're #1 again. #2 is a new entry into the top 10 list of concerns. I think our members are always concerned about taxes and spending at both the state and the federal level, but to have this federal budget and tax issue as the #2 item of concern for our members, I think reflects the national conversation about the so-called fiscal cliff, and clearly as that has endured as a topic of conversation both during the campaign and now after the campaign, not a surprise that this is a high-level concern for our members because it does represent a fairly significant risk, and we'll get to that in a second. #3, state taxes, and again, I think there's a good reason for that. We'll discuss that a little bit further. #4 is an issue that we've been focused on for a while, and now with the election behind us, with the president reelected, and I guess a diminished threat or reality of the health care bill at the federal level being repealed, I think now we're in a situation where we really have to reconcile two entirely different sets of requirements in many instances at the state and the federal level. Our newly re-energized and healthcare cost committee group has taken this on as an issue. Bill Grant from Cummins Property is the chair of that group, and this is one of the issues that we'll be dealing with on our members' behalf as we try to balance out the two different sets of requirements. We certainly don't want mass employers to have to deal with two radically different sets of requirements. That isn't practical, it's burdensome, and we want to try to get our arms around that. Employer mandates, sick leave, and paid leave in general. #5, high UI costs. And this is an issue that, again, we'll be confronting early in 2013 as there's a 25% unemployment insurance tax rate hike pending. We'll be advocating for a UI rate freeze as well as some broader systemic reforms. 7, electricity and fuel costs, controlling local taxes. 8, state employment law, which is sort of the broader basket of issues that we deal with. And then workforce availability, which no matter where we go, we hear from our members that despite what is a difficult economy from an employment perspective, they are still having trouble in some instances finding qualified people to work. I just want to depart quickly from the PowerPoint to the list of the other issues. I just want to call your attention to a couple of things. So I've divided the list, the top 10, the second 10, and then the last 3 or 4 here. You can see that the second level of issues contain some things that have historically been very important: regulatory burden concerns, workforce development concerns, I think tied back to workforce availability. That makes sense to me. Sustainability, keeping up with technology. Interestingly enough, with respect to an issue that I think is going to be hot and heavy very early in 2013, is the issue of transportation. And you can see for our members, it is the bottom of the the bottom of the lower 10 in terms of concern. And then the lowest level of concern at the very bottom here is access to credit. Just make the observation that when we first started doing the surveys, access to credit was a much more significant concern, and apparently that's no longer the case. So I guess that's good news. Hopefully that reflects your experience in terms of your company's ability to access credit. So using this list of issues, we will develop our legislative agenda and present that to the Executive Committee in December and then to the Board of Directors in January. Bills will all then be filed in late January, and then we'll be off to the races in terms of legislative advocacy. In the meantime, I just wanted to spend a few minutes giving you a little bit more detail in terms of what I think are the top-level issues that we'll be working on. Clearly, healthcare cost containment, as I suggested earlier, will continue to be a high priority for us. We will continue our very aggressive education efforts of the members, and from all reports that I've received, both from the members and from the staff, the education campaign continues to be hugely successful. Members are getting smarter about how they purchase healthcare and using that knowledge to save money. In terms of healthcare policy, I don't expect, truthfully, that there'll be much happening in the State House, at least in terms of the House and Senate and legislative activity, with the one exception perhaps being the reconciliation of state and federal health care requirements. But I think the bulk of the attention now shifts to the Healthcare Cost and Policy Commission, and you can see the group of folks pictured on the top right-hand side of your screen are the members of the Health and Policy Commission. I will call your attention to this fellow over here, third from the end on the right. Rick Lord, who's our president and CEO, has been named a member of the commission. Clearly a very important position for Rick and for us in terms of influencing how this whole conversation about implementing the healthcare cost legislation, how that will unfold here in the Commonwealth. And as we go through the next several months and as that commission stands up and begins its work, we will make sure that our members are fully informed about the discussions occurring there, because the conversations that occur at this commission level will very much influence the way healthcare cost control rolls out here in the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, we're trying to re-engage our members through the Healthcare Committee, and if you're interested in joining that group, you can give me a call, or you can give Kristen Lepore a call, or shoot us an email. We'd love to have more members involved in this very important effort. It's a good opportunity for us to learn from you and for us to exchange information about what's going on in this critical policy area. Beyond healthcare, which, as I said, is our #1 concern, I can tell you that both at the federal level and at the state level, the tax man cometh. And I don't mean to make it a joke. I know this is a serious issue, but I believe that we are about to enter into a period of fairly lengthy, possibly contentious conversations about tax policy. Again, clearly at the federal level, and you all know more about the fiscal cliff probably than I do, and so that drives the conversation federally. But we are expecting that there will be a similar conversation here at the state level. Originally, my thinking a month or so ago was that this revenue conversation would be focused or centered primarily around transportation. And if you've seen some of the news stories in the last couple of days, there's a fairly broad body of research that's coming out now and will come out between now and about the first of the year, detailing what's happening with the transportation system, and in particular some of the strained finances that exist within that system. And that obviously will drive a question, will drive the question of how to solve those issues, again, primarily for the transportation system itself. What is occurring now, and what I'm picking up from a variety of sources, both inside and outside of state government, is that the revenue conversation might in fact be broader than that, and may include increasing or attempting to increase revenues for other public purposes beyond transportation. The issue that's been mentioned most frequently is higher education or education more broadly. And the numbers that I've heard bandied about are anywhere from $1 to $2 billion in new revenue. Now, at this point, and I don't mention that number to frighten people, just to give you a sense for the order of magnitude of what this conversation might be about. And I don't have any particulars beyond sort of the general notion that this is what's being discussed. So part of this is giving you a heads up that the train's coming. I don't know precisely what types and kinds of revenue will be discussed. I did talk to the board of directors on Friday, and we will, I think, as again, people should expect, AIM will take a position that says the first thing we need to do is focus on growing the economy. It's far better to increase the number of taxpayers than it is to bump up the amount that the current taxpayers are paying. So a job growth, an economic growth argument is our first position, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that Massachusetts is on that job growth path. Secondly, I think we need to make sure that government is operating as efficiently as possible, and clearly this is an area where Massachusetts, much like any other entity, could stand some improvement. I think there have been strides made in terms of becoming more efficient, but I think there's more that can be done. And I think the Administration and Finance Secretariat has done a couple of things in terms of trying to make better use of technology. I think those are the types of things that need to be pursued in order to allow state government to provide services in the most cost-effective manner possible. And there are things that will push in that arena that make the efficiency of state government a higher priority. Once those things have been done, I think then you can take a look at a reformed state government, an expanding economy, and then get a handle on what the difference is between expenses and revenue, and then have a conversation about how best to respond to that delta between the two. And I think that's the path that we will suggest is the one that makes the most sense, and that's the conversation that we'd like to have in the State House with our elected officials. Clearly, as more details become available, we will share them with you. At the moment, all I have are sort of the notions that these things are coming, but I don't have any details in terms of what the specifics might be in terms of proposals. But hang on, they're coming. I apologize in advance for this very busy slide, and I just want to call your attention to the item in the top left-hand corner, and we'll send this PowerPoint out to everyone. For those of you who are responsible for taxation within your company, I would ask you to take a hard look at that story on the top left-hand side. For companies that claim the personal property tax exemption at the local level, so these are either manufacturing companies or R&D companies, you need to register with the Department of Revenue. This is a somewhat new process, and failure to register would put your personal property tax exemptions at the local level at risk. So I just wanted to mention that that's out there as an issue, and if you have questions, feel free to call Brad McDougall. He can walk you through how this works. But if you're a manufacturer or an R&D company, you've got to get on that and make sure that you're registered. As I mentioned before, unemployment insurance reform will be a high priority. We're looking at a 25% rate increase for January 1st. We intend to argue once again that that's unnecessary. There's $500 million in the UI Trust Fund, thereby making the need for a tax increase unnecessary. And then beyond that, we will again push for systemic reforms, try to make the system more efficient. We are fully engaged in the process of implementing some of the cost control items that were in last year's electricity reform bill. As those items become actionable, we will let you know. For commercial and industrial ratepayers, there will be a Department of Public Utilities proceeding starting sometime, I think, in January, which will rebalance rates within both within the C&I classification, but also across the entire system, whereby commercial and industrial ratepayers will be relieved of some of the burden that's been placed on them over the past 20 years through the distribution side of the bill. And I'll leave it there, but again, as we move from December into January, expect to hear more about that rate proceeding, and we'll make sure that those who are interested have a chance to weigh in and participate in that conversation. And the rest of this list, I think, is fairly self-explanatory. As I said earlier, we'll continue to watch the employment law issues. Those come up every year, and I expect that this session will be no different. With respect to the Capitol Hill update, I guess the only thing I want to mention is that while the national discussion about the fiscal cliff and tax reform is ongoing, I don't have a good handle for how or when that conversation will resolve itself. Every day you hear a slightly different story about, they're getting along, they're not getting along, the president needs to be tough, the president needs to compromise. In any event, they need to come to some agreement by the end of the year, and even if that agreement is to defer action for 3 or 6 months, they need to come to some sort of a conclusion, or all these, the taxes go up radically and spending on the federal level goes down dramatically as well. So clearly something's going to happen. I think what is of note for us here in Massachusetts is that while Washington is trying to get its fiscal house in order and businesses are waiting for that clarity, Massachusetts is about to engage in its own conversation about what's going to happen with revenue. And so the chilling effect that all of that uncertainty is having on the national economy is likely to have a similar effect here in Massachusetts as we go through sort of that same process in a parallel universe. I think it's something that we need to be concerned about. I think it's something that elected officials need to be aware of, because at a certain point I think you can try to do too much. And for those of you who are in strategic management positions within your company, sometimes it's important to pick a smaller number of things and do them well rather than try to juggle 18 different things all at the same time. My fear is that the Patrick administration, because clearly this is the end of the governor's second term, these next 2 years coming up, I think there's a sense that if they're going to act, they're going to have to act now, and I think they're going to be somewhat less open to taking a wait-and-see attitude, although I think that's the right posture to take. That said, once we get details on what's happening at the state level, once we get details on what's happening at the national level, we'll be sure to let everybody know and try to keep you as well informed as we possibly can. As always, appreciate your attending these events, appreciate your attention to some of the issues that we care about, and my fear is that I've shoveled a lot of stuff at you in a very rapid-fire manner, but I think these are all things that from your own perspective are either on the horizon or about to be in our face, and I just wanted to give you a chance to take a look at them. With that said, we will open the floor to questions, and I'd be happy to take any from anybody in the audience.